I'm Lissa Wadewitz, Associate Professor of History. This is Elisia Harder, class of 2020, and we are in the Nicholson Library on the Linfield College campus on January 28th at 2:51 p.m., interviewing Bruce Stewart, class of 49.
1949, yes.
So, just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and where you're from?
Sure. I was born in Auburn, Washington, which is adjacent to Kent, Washington. They didn't have a hospital in Kent, so I was born in Auburn, but we lived in Kent. I lived in Kent for 9 years, moved to Tacoma, lived in Tacoma and went through junior high and high school. And after I graduated from high school, I moved on to college. I joined the Navy Air Corps and moved on to college, and you'll be asking me questions about that later on, I'm sure.
Okay, so pretty much a Washington.
I'm a Washingtonian,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
But I'd like to claim being an Oregonian.
How do Oregonians respond to that?
I don't know.
All right, so now we're going to get into some questions about your military service.
Yes.
So when I talked to you earlier, you mentioned that you were in the Navy Air Corps during the war. Do you want to share with us what sort of made you want to enlist into the Army during the war?
Well,
or into the Navy?
Yeah. When I was in high school, of course, the war was going on, and most of us were thinking about joining the service. We wanted to serve our country. And the big question was, do we stay in school until we graduate, or do we graduate and then go in the service? But there really wasn't much of a question of whether we would or wouldn't go in. It was, yeah, we're going to go in the service. Well, the war was over in Europe in May of 1945, and I graduated in June of 1945. But just prior to that, I went down to the recruiting office and decided that I wanted to join the Navy. My dad had been in the Navy in World War I, and my brother was in the Navy in World War II. So that was where I was going to go, to the Navy. The recruiter said, we just opened up a program called the V5 program, which is the Navy Air Corps. And if you qualify, and if you take an exam and you pass, you can get into the Navy Air Corps and learn to fly. Well, that sounded great to me because I'd always wanted to fly. And so I signed up for that. I took the exam, I passed, and I was sworn in June of 1945. And as soon as I graduated, well, it was 3 weeks after I graduated, they sent me to the School of Mines in Butte, Montana, which was an engineering school. And that's where I began my career. I was just taking engineering courses. There was, that summer, I was in Colorado, or in Butte, Montana. And then they sent us to Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and I spent 2 terms in Colorado College. By that time, obviously, the war was over with Japan, which was in the middle of August of 45. And so I was called in. Well, they told all of us that the war was over, we don't need as many pilots as we thought we did, so if you want to get out, you can get out. At that time, I decided I didn't want to stay in the military, so I said, yep, I want to get out. So they sent me timeout. So they sent me to boot camp in Great Lakes for 1 month, trying to decide what to do with me. And then I spent 2 months in Memphis, Tennessee, in the Naval Air Technical Training Center as a mess cook. I ended up as a seaman second class. I was discharged in August of 1946. I left there, came to Linfield, enrolled and started school at Linfield in 1946.
So you mentioned that you hadn't quite, the war ended before you were done doing any sort of training or were prepared to be sent off anywhere. Did you have any idea at the time if you had finished your training and if the war continued where you would have been sent, or were you ever thinking about that? Was that being talked about at the time?
We thought what we wanted to do was to become fighter pilots and go out on an aircraft carrier and do our thing there. And that's what I expected to do. As long as the war was going on, I wanted to continue, get my training, and whatever it took, I wanted to stay in.
So how many other soldiers were in your program with you?
We were called sailors, and we were there were 100 guys in our unit in school. Yeah.
How many of you guys
Company.
Stayed versus, as you said you decided to leave?
Yeah.
How many of the men stayed?
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know at all. I only know of one who was my best buddy that I met. He was from Southern California. He stayed in. I talked with him about 2 years ago. He stayed in, fought during Korean War, the Vietnamese War, and made a career out of as a pilot. But there's only one out of all that 100 in our company that I know of.
So while you were in training, what was sort of an average week like for you? What were you doing sort of day to day?
It was very much like going to school, like here at Linfield. We had classes. We also had some time that we spent on the tarmac marching, learning protocol of how we should behave and how we needed to be like sailors. Yeah, but we would go to class. Generally, we marched to class and had a little bit of control that way. I guess you'd call it control.
So you mentioned that you were a mess cook?
Mess cook doesn't sound quite right for the average layperson. A mess cook is one who puts the food on the trays as the guys walk down the food line. That was my job. Prepare, get it ready to serve, clean up after, clean up the tables, and that was it.
And that was
3 meals a day.
3 meals a day.
Yeah.
And then you said you were a mess cook. I was taking notes. That you were a sailor.
Yeah. In the Navy, they're called a sailor. Yeah. Whether you're seaman, apprentice seaman, or admiral, you're a sailor.
Okay. And did you serve on a ship then?
No, I never saw salt water from the time I enlisted till I was discharged.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. No.
Was that unusual? Do you know?
No, not unusual. It depended upon what the assignment was. There are a number of sailors that probably were never attached to a ship. They were assigned someplace in the United States. Or they might have gone to some other country and been on land rather than on a ship.
And have you ever regretted not pursuing the pilot training?
Oh, there were times, I suppose, I regretted that I didn't learn to fly there. I did learn to fly when I was 55 and got my license and owned an airplane for 15 years and got my fill of flying and enjoyed it.
Do you think one of the reasons you got your flying license is because you were in this program early on?
Not sure. No, I don't think so. I don't think it was because of that. It's just that I had always wanted to fly. And when you get married and have kids, you don't have enough money generally, in order to get a license and have an airplane of your own. So it was later on, after the kids were gone, that I was able to do that.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So, Is there anything else about your military training that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I really think that young people would do well to have some kind of discipline. What I'm thinking of is the discipline that you're expected to be involved in the military. You learn to take orders. You learn to take care of yourself. And I think that a lot of young people today don't get that. There were not just today, but for generations now. They have not. In the military now, it's voluntary. You're not required to attend, and a lot of people don't go that maybe should, to learn some discipline. And
Why do you think that is, that some, that from generations going forward don't have the same sort of sense of discipline that maybe generations before did?
why do I think that?
Mm-hmm.
I really can't speak for everybody. I can only speak for my own connection. You probably, we haven't talked about it yet, but I became a teacher after I graduated from Linfield and watched young people for 36 years in the education field. And since that time, I haven't seen quite so many. But you see young people that just don't have a sense of discipline, of being able to know right from wrong, and or how to control themselves from being
Going back to something you
Sorry.
said earlier, you said you enlisted right after you graduated from high school?
Yeah, actually, I went down to the recruiter's office prior to graduating, but it was after I had graduated that the program opened up and I passed, and that was when I was sworn in. So it was in June, actually June 22nd of 1945.
So you were 18.
No, I was 17 at that time, yeah.
And was that really common? Were your fellow soldiers?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, very common for everybody, all the guys. I don't know whether many girls would. I suppose there were some girls that enlisted as well, but it was mostly guys.
Did you know anybody who was even younger than yourself?
No. And I became 18 in August of 45, so it was only 2 months.
Still.
Yeah.
So shall we move on to talking about your time here at Linfield College? Why did you end up at Linfield College? What about the college appealed to you?
Okay. Linfield was well known as a Baptist school at that time. I was raised in the Baptist, American Baptist Church in Tacoma, and two of my friends had come here the year before. And so while I was in the service, I got letters from them of how they liked being here at Linfield. At the time, probably I was thinking about becoming a medical missionary, and I thought the fact that it was a Baptist college, and I'd probably be connecting with a lot of Christian students, that it would be to my advantage to be here. And so we had heard that it was an American Baptist college, and so early on, before I went into service, I had intended to go to Washington State in Pullman, but then after my friends came here, I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I came down.
And so what was it like, just in general, to be on campus at that time?
Well, it was really cool. I came as a sophomore. So I wasn't a freshman, and I didn't have to follow all those rules that freshmen had to follow. And I had a number of friends that I had known through church circles that were already here. So it wasn't as though I came not knowing anybody. I knew all these guys, and it was an extension of high school. And I studied campusry in high school, and I studied campusry at Linfield. And by campusry, I mean I played around a lot. I didn't spend a lot of time studying like I should have. I was not an A student. Had a good time at school.
While you were here at Linfield, were you active in any campus clubs or sports teams?
No sports. I had played football in high school and injured my shoulder as a senior. And I had a problem with that a little bit when I was in the service. Several times the shoulder went out of joint. And so when I came here, I decided that although I liked football, I would love to have played it, but I decided that I didn't want to mess around with my body that way. So I did not participate in athletics. I did participate in the governance of the student body. I was sophomore class president. I became student body president in my senior year. Belonged to fraternity. I should say that the Christian influence didn't affect me very much while I was here at school. I kind of slipped a little bit there.
But it did affect some of the things you were allowed to do on campus.
Oh yeah,
correct?
oh yeah. We could not smoke on campus, and so we would go off on Blaine Street between classes and stand in the street off the curb so that we could smoke. Obviously no drinking on campus. So on some evenings we might have a beer or two somewhere else off campus.
And were you able to come to college on the GI Bill?
I did. The GI Bill was my savior. Yeah, my parents didn't have the money, or I suppose they could have helped me out if I needed it, but I didn't need that. I also, while I was here, I drove school bus for Joe Dancer for 2 years. I also worked in the scullery, in the kitchen, washing pots and pans in the evening. Made a few bucks.
And were there a lot of other male students here also on the GI Bill that you know of?
Do you know, I don't know how many male students. As I understand it, in the year before I came, which would have been in 1945, there were not very many male students here. I don't know the number. But in 46, the war was over and we had a lot of ex-GIs that came here. So the enrollment increased tremendously.
And very rapidly.
Rapidly, yes. The first year, and again, I don't have the exact timing, but in the first year in 46, when students came here, male students, there weren't enough rooms in the dormitory for them, and so they set up cots in Riley building, which was the gymnasium of the campus. And they stayed on those cots for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember, because I had come here as a sophomore and I was here earlier than most of them, so I lived in Mac Hall for 1 semester, and then I joined a fraternity, and we had a fraternity house over on Davis Street, 501 South Davis, and I started living in the fraternity house.
And you said you majored, quote unquote, majored in campusry.
Yeah, seriously, I got a degree in education and in mathematics.
But some of your campusry activities, in addition to the fraternity and smoking, what about
Scratch that,
scratch that one? Okay.
please.
What about some of the other events that we've seen some pictures of in the yearbooks, and we can look at your yearbooks here in a second if you'd like the May Day events? Do you remember any campus events like that?
Well, we could talk about May Day activities, and I'm sure that I was involved from the start, but as a senior, as a student body president, I was the, what was the title? Like the king, I guess. Not the king, but the prime minister that knighted all of the knights, and no, the queen knighted the knights, sorry, but I had the official responsibility of being the prime minister of the events. Early on, and I think it was even happening when I was a senior, but in the first 2 or 3 years that I was here, we had a lot of activities for May Day, and there was a May Day maypole, and they did the dance around the maypole. We had a May Day parade down 3rd Street in McMinnville. Fraternities and sororities had floats and floats. There was a dance, a dinner, and so it was a big thing. I don't know when that changed. I think in the 70s they stopped doing that kind of thing, but it was a big activity on campus at that time when I was here. Other activities, homecoming was a big activity. We had a homecoming bonfire that out on the other side of where the football field is now was an open field, and students piled up wood from many places, like tearing down fences that they found out in the countryside and gates, and it's just amazing how much wood appeared to build up that bonfire. And then the evening of, not sure whether it was the evening before or the evening of homecoming, they would set that bonfire on fire, and it was quite an event. So I hesitate to say, and I may ask that this all be rubbed out, is that some of those pieces of wood should not have been piled onto the fire.
I'm sure the statute of limitations is expired.
So you then mentioned that you studied math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, another activity that I was in was a cappella choir. I sang in the choir for 2 years in my sophomore and junior years. At that time, we had a choir of about 60 members, and we traveled a bit. It was a pretty big deal. I also acted in 2 or 3 plays that we had. Never the head actor, just kind of an assistant.
Do you remember any of the plays?
No.
No.
Well, I can't remember the name, so no, cancel that.
Okay. So you were really a liberal arts all around.
I'd like to think so, yeah. Involved in school politics and school activities. I attended athletic events, very much supportive of them, but I didn't participate in them.
And in your role as in student governance, do you remember any of the issues of the day that were of importance to students?
Not really. There's always the tug of war between administration and students. And I ran for the office on the platform of I was going to get President Harry Dillon to do what we students wanted to have done. And that kind of went over, I guess, pretty good. And so I won the election. And it wasn't as bad as all that, but we got along very well together. President Dillon and I would go to Rotary Club meetings together, and we got along fine. I think maybe, I don't know whether, there was no dancing at Linfield prior to 46, maybe 45, 46. But once the GIs showed up, they relaxed that ruling, and we could have school dances, and so we did that. It was one of our activities that I don't know whether we had to try to get the president to agree to that or not. I'm not sure whether it was a student body activity that we went to see the president about.
And why do you think they agreed to change that policy?
Oh, probably we'd have a revolt, and I don't know. I'm not sure why. It's just that seemed to be the thing. Dancing had become more open, more liberal than the school had to change its way in order to keep the students here. That if you're too conservative and too restrictive, the students aren't going to be here. So they had to open up.
So you mentioned you joined a fraternity when you came to Linfield. Can you tell us which fraternity you joined? And also, I'm wondering if a lot of other men who came back from the war also joined fraternities.
The answer to your second question is yes. A lot of GIs joined fraternities. I joined Alpha Gamma Nu, which was a local fraternity at the time, because a couple of my friends from Tacoma were already members. And I was pledged, and it seemed like the right fit for me. We had athletes, we had students, we had student government members, just a bunch of really all-around nice guys, in my opinion. Other fraternities, one was much more athletically oriented, and so they got the jocks in that club. Another one was strictly academic, and mostly those guys recruited the academics. So there were, I think, 4 or 5 fraternities at that time. Alpha Gamma Nu became Theta Chi the year after I left in 1949 summer. So in 1950 they were Alpha Gamma, or they were Theta Chi. I became a Theta Chi fraternity member. I think there was some kind of ritual I had to go through and say I do or whatever. But Alpha Gamma Nu was my fraternity. Okay. So do you want to see, this is a picture of 501 South Davis. It was a beautiful old home, and we had lots of guys living there, and it was really neat. Unfortunately, several years after I left, one of the fraternity members tried to get a fire going in the fireplace and threw some gasoline on it, and it started all right, but it wasn't. They couldn't stop the fire, and it burned the house down. So it's gone.
Well, could you have him hold up the picture that we took?
Because this would be reflective, I think.
His picture we used for the photo.
Yeah.
Of him as a sailor. Yeah.
What?
Show this one too. Talk about this strapping young man up high.
Up high?
Yeah, like that. Right
Like
there.
this?
Talk about that one. Who's that?
Oh, this is a picture, kind of an official picture after I joined the Navy, and So I was a seaman first class when I first started. They made me a seaman first class as an officer candidate at School of Mines in Butte. After I went to boot camp, I became an apprentice seaman, and when I left boot camp after 1 month, I became a seaman second class, which is not as high as first class, and that's how I ended up the service as a second class Navy recruit.
You were 17 in that picture?
In this picture, I was 17, yes.
Studied math, and when you left Linfield, what did you go on to do?
Well, let's go back just a little bit. When I was in the Navy, I was taking engineering courses. I was going to become, I think I mentioned earlier that I wanted to be a medical missionary. Well, I dropped the missionary part early on, but I still wanted to go into medicine. And by the time I got to my junior year, I decided that probably medicine was not a possibility. I didn't do well in chemistry, and part of that is because of the campestry. But I didn't do well in chemistry, and so in the middle of my junior year, I decided that I was not going to go into medicine. But then at that time, most young men believed that once they left college, they had to have a job, and there wasn't any horsing around and trying to decide later on what you're going to do. So I started thinking, what am I going to do? Well, I don't know, but I've only got a year and a half left of school. I've got to do something. What will it be? Well, maybe I could be a teacher until I find out what I really want to do. And so, okay, I'm going to be a teacher, but what would I teach? I don't know. What do I like? I don't know. Well, I did fairly well in high school in mathematics. Maybe I could teach mathematics. So that's why I went into education and mathematics and spent the rest of the year and a half with education courses and math courses primarily. So then I became a teacher, got my certificate, and I got a job teaching in junior high school in Salem, Oregon. And I taught there for Parish Junior High School for 10 years, and then moved on across the tracks to North Salem High School in 1960. Went to McNary High School when it was built in 1965. Became the director of the math program in McNary. In 1972, I went to North High as Dean of Boys, which they no longer have deans now, but they, after a couple of years, I became assistant principal at North High. And my last 5 years, I was mathematics coordinator for the Salem Public School System, retired in 1985. And that's my education career. I don't know whether you want to hear that. I did take 1 year off to do graduate work at Boston College in 1960-61 on the National Science Foundation Scholarship, working on a master's degree in mathematics. In 1970-71, I took a year off to be president of the Oregon Education Association. It was the second year of OEA that allowed the president to be full-time president and leave their school district. And so I did that. So that out of that 36 years in education, I spent 2 years away from the classroom or administration.
So just going back for a second to your training.
Yes.
Were there any professors that you had particularly good relationships with, or
Oh,
do you
yeah.
remember?
Yeah, Win Dolan was, Win and I were trustees together for a number of years, but first year that Win came to Linfield as a professor, I was in his first class that he taught, and and we got along well together.
And then
And of
later you
course-
served on the trustees
Yeah,
together.
yeah. And Happy Mahaffey was another great professor. I had 2 years of Spanish with him, and he was just a lot of fun. He was also a Theta Chi, or Alpha Gamma Nu fraternity advisor.
So you said when you decided to become a teacher and sort of see if there was anything you would rather be doing, but once you started working as a teacher, did you realize that you sort of wanted to stay there?
Well, that's an interesting question because even after I started teaching in junior high, there were times when I thought, man, I got to get more money than what I'm making here. It was pretty. My first job was $3,030 for the entire year, and teaching junior high. And with the family coming on, it just seemed like I needed to get something else besides. But I stayed on. There were several of us in junior high that thought, well, let's check out FBI and see what it would be like to be working for the FBI, and went as far as to see what you had to do and see what the questionnaires were, and decided maybe that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. But in junior high, it became a real joy for me. I enjoyed the junior high kids. The faculty, the administration were super. We had a close-knit faculty, and we had, in those days, discipline was not a serious problem. Kids, if you said don't run in the hall, they'd at least walk past you instead of continuing to run. But those were good days. Those were probably my most fun days of all, teaching. I started out teaching 6 classes of general mathematics, 9th grade, 36 kids in a class. Same thing, 6 times a day. But they were good kids, and I got to a place where I enjoyed them. We had several talent shows that I organized, and we had fun doing that. And I was responsible for the auditorium. We had a new auditorium, and I got the keys to the auditorium. And when we rented it out, I was responsible for taking care of the people that came. And so I made a few extra bucks and enjoyed it very much.
So I know we're getting close to where we should probably come to a close here, but if you look back on your life and think about your military service and living through the war, do you think that that living through that time had a big impact on you as an individual and who you went on to become?
On my life? Well, yes, definitely. We were at war. We had a lot of rationing when I was in junior high, high school. When Pearl Harbor occurred, we were caught flat-footed. We didn't expect anything like that to happen. So there was no organization in Tacoma to prepare for war if it came our way. So during the first few days, the administration or the city government called on anybody that had any kind of an organization to participate. I was a member of the Boy Scouts. They called on me to be an air raid warden in Tacoma, and so for the first week, my job with another fellow scout would be to walk our 6-block area at night and make sure that there were no lights showing from shades that were not pulled or whatever. So that made a big impact on my life. And of course, we began building ships in the Tacoma shipyards. My dad became a journeyman in the shipyards. My brother worked there before he went off to the Navy. I worked there for 2 weeks after I graduated from high school and before I went off to the Navy. So that was a big thing. And of course things got organized and we were at war. It was, everybody participated. You hear about good wars and bad wars. There's no good war. But we all in this country, I believe, we rallied around this war, World War II. That was the Korean War, the Vietnamese War, some of the other wars that we've been involved in. They're not as well supported by the country, and rightly so, I think. But that's another story, I guess.
So, if you do you have any advice for students today?
Oh, if you keep your nose to the grindstone rough and you hold it down there long enough, of these three things your life will compose: your life, the stone, and your big fat nose. No, they're canceled. No, I would advise young people to take advantage of the opportunities that are there to study well. But that's not the only thing that you learn in the college life. There's more than just going to class and studying subjects. There's learning life, and I think the life on the campus is an important factor in growing up and maturing. And you can see it from freshmen to seniors. Yeah.
So, is there anything that we've forgotten to ask you about that you want to take this
Oh,
opportunity
wow.
to tell us about?
You want to know my entire career after I left, after I left education, or while I was in education? No, I don't think so. I have lots of stories parts of my life that I really have enjoyed, that made my life complete. Having an airplane for 15 years was really marvelous. I was a commercial fisherman for 2 summers out of Newport. Had a 22-foot dory with outriggers, and we fished out of Newport. My son was my first mate. The two of us fished the entire summer of 1974. If you can't bond with your son in a 22-foot dory during the daytime and a one-room cabin at night for an entire summer, you're never going to bond with him. He was 20 years old that year, and we had a great time. So I was a fisherman, a commercial fisherman. That was during the summer months when I was not connected with the school district.
Did you fish anywhere else?
No, just there.
Just there.
Commercially, yeah. I spent several 2-week trips with the church in Salem on mission projects, just going to various parts of the world to work on a project. We went to Haiti, to Costa Rica, to Bolivia, to El Salvador, to Czech Republic, to doing 2-week work projects, which was an eye-opener for me through the years of other parts of the world where you see people that are living a different kind of lifestyle than we do. And that's one thing that I would say about Linfield and the Linfield program for overseas experiences, which I think is really great, super for kids, young people to learn what it's like outside of the United States.
I have 2 questions. for you to know. First one is just, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about your Linfield experience? And answer it to them, don't look at me.
To my Linfield experience?
Yeah, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Linfield?
Oh man, what what comes to mind? It was a great experience. I matured when I came here. I wasn't ready for college actually when I left high school. I really wasn't. And as I mentioned to you earlier, that I spent quite a bit of time playing around and not taking the studies really seriously. But in the process, I learned about growing up and taking responsibility. Got married in 1949, 2 months after I graduated, and we were on our way to a family, and there was I became an adult, I think.
And did you meet your wife here at Linfield?
She was here for 2 years, yeah. I took her away so that she didn't get a chance to graduate from school. And she always regretted that she never went back to finish, to get a degree. But, yeah, we were married for 62 and a half years. In my first marriage, and my second marriage, we've been married now 5 years.
And then my second question has nothing to do with Linfield, so I want to make sure we're done before I ask it. What year did you go to Haiti?
What year did I go to Haiti? It was probably 1985, 6, 7, somewhere along there, yeah.
I was on that trip with you.
You were?
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Remember there were 3 people that weren't from the Salem church, they were from Coos Bay?
Yes,
Parents and a kid.
and that was you?
I was a kid. I was 16.
And tell me again your last name?
Kevin Curry. My father's Edward.
Curry.
Yeah,
Yes,
Barbara
all right,
Curry.
comes the dawn, yeah. What'd you think of that experience?
It changed my life.
Changed your life? Mine too.
Yeah.
You remember in Port-au-Prince, going through the slums of Port-au-Prince as we were driving into the city was, wow,
Yeah.
knocked you over.
I never put two, I've heard your name 1,000 times and never put 2 and 2 together. So. But as soon as you said that, I went,
Ta-da!
Wow.
Ah,
the floods helped lead the trip. That flood was on that trip.
Yeah.
And helped lead it.
you see Bev and Bob, now Bob comes over here all the time, and their grandkids are here now.
Yeah,
and,
their sons both.
yeah, and Jeff and Jim both went to Linfield. And, yeah.
Small world. Wow.
Small world, yeah. And this, I don't know whether this is part of what you want to know or not, but whenever I go anywhere around the country and I see somebody that has a Linfield shirt on, I say hi. I get emotional about that. I really do. And it's happy, but emotional.
Thank you so much for your time. Was there anything in particular from the yearbooks that you wanted to?
Not really. I just thought I'd bring them along in case you had some questions that we might talk about. Please wipe out that emotional thing.
Are you kidding me? That's the best part.
Let's get to the end of the interview. Right. Well, why don't we wrap things up there then?
Oh, yeah?
Sorry?
We'll wrap things up there then.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.